Jonathan, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to speak here, although a little intimidating with such a great audience and having had so many speakers before. But I will do my best to try and intrigue you and keep your interest to the end, although I know you have a foreign minister who will be speaking later. I have the privilege of leading the Metropolitan Police Service, which has around 50,000 people. I'm proud of what they do to keep London, which is a great world city, safe. I know there are French people in the audience, but we are 4 times the size of Paris, 3 times the size of Rome, and it's a great place to visit, and I may return to that. The Metropolitan Police, as well as leading the police service in London, also leads the Counter-Terrorism network throughout the United Kingdom. And it's in that role that I'd like to share just a few thoughts about where we are at the moment and some of the challenges for the future. So really talking about the terrorist threat we face, the UK perspective on how we're countering that threat, and the future challenges that we are concerned about. We need to remember that, of course, the UK has for many years lived under the shadow of terrorism. Through the 1970s and 90s, there was Irish terrorism, which is dominant in UK policing. And although that's much improved, it remains an issue in the province of Northern Ireland, though presently not on the mainland. The threat from international terrorism is not a new one. And as we've heard already all of today, and we know, the events of the 11th of September 2001 showed the ordinary citizen the true scale of that threat. London itself was attacked on the 7th of July in 2005 when 52 people died in a series of bombings that struck our city on that Thursday morning. And we recently saw the loss of life again with the brutal murder of drummer Lee Rigby on the 22nd of May 2013 by British citizens radicalised to launch a terror attack within the communities in which they were born. Such simple, less sophisticated attacks by self-organised or lone actors are harder to detect through our normal intelligence techniques. We need communities to help us, and I will return to that later. On the whole, although I said that we've lived in the UK under the shadow of terrorism, that can be a misleading sobriquet. Should you visit London, and I hope that you do, or any of our major cities, you'll find citizens going about their normal lives, for the most part, untroubled by the impact of the terrorist threat. And I know that we're fortunate in that, because not every country in the world can feel the same. But the threat to the UK exists and is real, and it's a real and present threat. Since 2001, our police, in partnership with our intelligence agencies, have disrupted at least one major terror plot every year. The UK government does not seek to hide the threat from the public. On the contrary, the threat level has been published by the UK's Joint Terrorist Analysis Centre ever since the 1st of August in 2006. And as recently as Friday the 29th of August this year, less than 2 weeks ago, the British public were told that the UK threat level had been raised to severe, and that means an attack is highly likely and could occur without warning, although there is no intelligence to suggest that an attack is imminent. So from whom might this attack come? From where might it be launched? And why? Well, of course, we've heard an awful lot today about ISIL. The focus of the international community is quite rightly on them for reasons that I might come back to. But we've got to forget that there are many other threats out there. But when a new enemy emerges, we have to remember, with the speed and ferocity in which we've seen ISIL develop, we've not got to forget those other threats. In the UK, there are 60 international terrorist groups which are prescribed. So these are bodies that cannot exist in law, and we will take action against financing people who are members of them and make sure that we do our best to use the criminal law to prevent their success. The IRA, Hamas, Al-Qaeda and all its various offshoots are among those which are prescribed in the UK, and we have to continue to confront these people. We must not let down our guard. And of course, extremism comes in many forms, not just Islamic. We've seen a recent increase in anti-Semitic violence, which is a worrying trend in the UK, mainly through harassment. But as we know, then of course, any expression of racial hatred can lead to violence in the future by people who've seized upon events in the Middle East for their own hate-inspired agenda. As with all other forms of hate crime, we do take this extremely seriously. And we work with community groups, one of which is represented at this conference here today, the Community Security Trust, to safeguard the Jewish community in the UK and make sure that they are protected from any attacks and, of course, reassured as well. And it's our perennial challenge to make sure that we prioritise our limited resources on the most challenging threats. It's not an exact science. It has to require carefully balanced judgments. It is a huge task, and I'm immensely proud of the people who on our behalf carry out that work day in and day out. We've already heard about ISIL, and we know that in fact it is not a true representation of the Muslim faith, but that is how it's portrayed. And I'm going to come back to that because of the nature of the community within all our countries, and particularly I'm going to talk, of course, about the UK. And it is a threat that all governments are having to face here and now. It's not my role to speak about UK government policy. I can only talk as one of the leaders of our counter-terror effort about the law enforcement response and keeping one of the great capitals of the world safe. Over the years, the UK has invested heavily in its counter-terrorist policing structure, which is comprised of a series of counter-terrorist policing units right across the UK. That structure has grown and developed under fire. There are now 5 counter-terrorist units, of which the Metropolitan Police is the largest, based around our big cities, and 4 further counter-terrorism intelligence units, which are based around slightly smaller percentages of population. That network has intelligence, investigation, and forensic capabilities. We share IT systems and work in multi-force teams. We have a Metropolitan Police Senior National Coordinator that draws those units together. And of course, all the units work closely and in tandem with our security service partners. We work to a joint strategy, and that, as many of you may know, but I'll repeat here for the sake of simplicity, is our contest strategy. It has 4 strands, to which I'll talk to briefly about some of the activity, which we believe is successful, but we are never complacent. Central to any counter-terrorist strategy is the pursuit of those who are involved in terrorism, and the first line of our contest strategy is about pursue. Police activity in this regard has been escalating over recent months, and indeed over recent years. We've seen a significant rise in the number of Syria-related incidents. In the first half of this year alone, we've had a total of 69 arrests for a variety of offences, including travelling abroad for terrorist training. Such arrests have been made at a rate 5-fold to that in 2013. Interventions, which include stopping suspects at ports, cash seizures, have grown by 50%. More widely, in the year ending March 2014, 230 people have been arrested for terrorism-related offences within the UK, and that's an increase of around 20% from 5 years ago. More than half of those arrested were charged, mainly for terrorist offences, and many of those who were charged still await trial in the Crown Court. But I can tell you that of those who were charged from last year, there have been 43 trials. We have had 37 convictions, which is an 86% conviction rate, and of the 37 convicted, 36 of those were sentenced to immediate custody, 4 of whom received a life sentence. So what do these numbers tell us? Well, we believe the message is clear, that we will relentlessly and ruthlessly pursue terrorists and put them before the criminal courts where that is possible. But that, of course, is a challenge which I'll return to, particularly at the moment, in terms of ISIL. So they will ideally be put before the courts and be convicted and go to prison. That is now becoming an accumulating issue about the prison population of terrorists. And if we look back over the last 4 years, the number of people who have been convicted has risen broadly every year, from around 126 to last year 154. The cumulative effect of long prison sentences means that in the prison population, there's a growing population of people who have a potential network. We have over 80,000 people in the British prison service, so it is not a massive number. But of course, these people are concentrated in the high security estate. And what that means is a decision has to be made about whether to separate them or whether that's manageable. Alternatively, they are kept together to prevent them organising in a political way. So it's an increasing number of people to manage, and it's also an area which involves threat of radicalisation. Those convictions are achieved through an awful lot of painstaking work, both by the security service and our detectives. And I think what it shows is that the best of our professional endeavours by the security service and police work do work. We also have a strand called prevent. That strand is to try and to prevent those people who are vulnerable to extremist views developing into terrorists. We need to stop them getting involved in terrorism, to be drawn away from their families and communities, and more recently to follow ISIL out in Syria and Iraq. ISIL's lifeblood is not only the financing, but also the fighters. So if you can cut them off before they arrive there, it's a great opportunity. Radicalisation, as we know, is not an event, it's a process. And in an era of the internet and social networking, extreme views are often more accessible than ever. We also need to be alive to the possibility of extremist views circulating in public institutions, from schools to prisons, and our colleges and universities. And we need to find a way to limit the reach of a poisonous ideology. On the internet, we're working hard. In the last 4 years, the Metropolitan Police has instigated the removal of over 45,000 pieces of online content through our Counter-Terrorist Internet Referral Unit. We need to continue that work with the industry. We have a part of the Prevent programme which is called Channel. The Channel programme is a mechanism where agencies work together in an early intervention to protect, support and divert people away from radicalisation. Referral of individuals into the Channel programme can come from a wide range of sources, such as concerned family, a social worker, a teacher, a doctor. Channel then adopts a multi-agency approach to help divert these people who are referred to it away from radicalisation. Since last year, we've seen a 58% increase in referrals. The total number of Channel referrals now, nationally, since April 2007 to March of 2014, stands at 3,934. There are plans to legislate further to ensure that the safeguarding of individuals vulnerable to radicalisation is a legal duty for our public bodies, in the same way as it would be in terms of victims of child abuse or domestic violence. That would be a significant change in the UK, but we believe that it's important that all bodies make an important contribution to keeping us all safe. We have an element about protect, which is in fact in London is very important to us because we have the seat of government. This is about protecting high-profile sites and making sure they're protected from any potential attack should our intelligence not be able to prevent that before the attack actually is launched. And finally, prepare, because that says that if any of these methods of preventing an attack fails, then we need to be prepared to actually deal with the consequences. And in London, as right across the country, we have various contingency emergency command and control right across the agencies to make sure that we are able to respond in a timely and professional manner. Now, I've concentrated an awful lot at the moment on things that are specialist around terrorism. But I want to take just a few minutes to talk about basic community policing, which is the bedrock, certainly for us in the UK, of making sure that we work with our community, and particularly in the area of terrorism. There are some core values of policing, and we think that this contributes to some of the success that we've had, although it is a challenging environment in which to operate. The public must have trust in their police if they are to tell them things which allow us to take action on their behalf. The police in the UK remain unique among many major nations in that we are unarmed, and we think this is a very significant contribution to people speaking to and trusting their police. We need the cooperation of the public at every step if we are to tackle the terrorist threat at home. We ask the public to contact the police on an anti-terrorist hotline or something called Crime Stoppers, and every year about 1,500 people do this. We took the step within the last 12 months of asking families to report the fact that their children, their brothers, their sisters may be visiting Syria or Iraq. And you may think, well, why would a family do that? Well, the major argument we've deployed is that if we can intervene before they travel, we have a chance of prevention. If we intervene after they've travelled, then we have a chance of investigation. So it's a way of saving them from either, in some cases, serious injury or death, and also preventing a criminal offence and the radicalisation which may follow. And that message does seem to be well received, particularly amongst the women in those communities which we think are most affected. Information is the lifeblood of our counter-terrorist effort, and we'll only have all of that information should we have the confidence of the communities that we serve. But it is, as I've said already, a challenge. London is a diverse city, 8.4 million people. It's grown amazingly over the last 11 or 12 years. The population census between those years tells us that around 3.7 million people grew in England and Wales. 25% of that growth happened in the capital city of London. 33% of Londoners hold a passport for another country. We are told that over 300 languages now spoken in London. 28% of the 250,000 people we arrest in the Metropolitan Police a year are foreign national offenders. There are just over 1 million Muslims living in London. The overwhelming majority of those support a democratic liberal approach, 99% of them. But what it does mean is that in a diverse, moving and growing community, it can be easier in London to hide and for a terrorist to manoeuvre and prepare. And that really is a challenge in a very big city that's growing at such pace. So we are investing in our neighbourhood policing teams. Despite the fact that we are losing, because of a recession that affects many parts of the world, around £600 million on a budget of £3.6 billion, we are going to make sure that we put 2,600 police officers more into our community policing network. That will take some doing, but we're already part way along that way, because we know that if we have a close relationship, we will get a great result. We also need religious leaders to speak out. We have seen some recent evidence in the UK of this happening. Imams and scholars based in the UK recently issued a fatwa condemning ISIL as an extremist organisation, stating it is an obligation on British Muslims to actively oppose its poisonous ideology, especially when it is promoted within Britain. Now, it's not been too often that we have seen that kind of condemnation, but I think it does have some power beyond the ability of a police chief or government to make these very clear statements. And we believe that more of this in the future will actually make a great deal of help in supporting the counter-terrorist events that we plan in the future. Although we work in partnership with the security service, of course they work in the background, and we are the only force, certainly in the UK, who have the power of arrest, the power of intervention. And these decisions, when we make those interventions, become more and more difficult in deciding when to make that intervention, as the point being achieved when there is enough evidence for a charge or is someone's life at threat. And getting that decision right is a constant challenge day by day, and is a real and present problem at the moment. We see that particularly when we see foreign fighters returning. We've already heard, and we've seen the numbers, of the various, the large numbers of people from various countries who've gone initially to Syria. The UK has seen over 500 foreign fighters travel to Syria and Iraq, and a significant proportion have already returned. The return of potentially militarised individuals from Iraq or Syria to the streets of the UK with their new mindset, experiences and associations is a risk to our communities, and it's a challenge that we're facing now. And of course, as quickly as they travelled through Iraq, they may be reversed, and should they all arrive back, which we call the cliff edge argument, together, then that's a real and present challenge that we have to face, which leads to some of the proposals that we have for the future. We are challenged day after day that we should use the criminal law to actually investigate and obviously put people on charge before a court, which is fine, but of course in trying to gain evidence from failed states with police forces that don't exist, this is a real challenge for any law enforcement agency, and is one that we are facing now. Because of course it is the ideal, but it's not always that the ideal is available to us at the moment. There are some proposals for change around this cliff edge argument, and the British government, the Prime Minister David Cameron, has been talking about 3 or 4 ideas that he thinks and the government think will be helpful. Some of them are controversial, but that's the nature of political debate, and it's for politicians to decide where they want to draw the line between public safety and the protection of liberty. First of all, there has been discussion about the removal temporarily of passports from British citizens trying to leave to enter certain countries, that the police could return passports for a period of about a month to build a case against the individuals who are leaving, and at the very least to disrupt their travel. Secondly, possibly means to exclude British citizens from the UK. Have they actually committed acts of terrorism in Syria or Iraq? And that is probably the most controversial and most legally challenging of the options. There's still a need for airlines, as we heard earlier, to provide timely information on passenger lists and who is travelling. And then finally, the possibility to exclude people from areas of the UK to go and be relocated to other areas where it is believed they'll be able to conspire less and be less effective. So, as with all new legislation, the police can give advice, the security service give advice, but Parliament will decide. And we work closely with government in describing our challenges, making our proposals, but at the end of the day, accepting the democratic process will decide what we have for the future. Can I say in conclusion just a couple of things? First of all, it's a pleasure to be here in Israel. It is my first visit too, and there was some advice at the time that we were making decisions about coming here that perhaps it wasn't the right time to come. As far as I was concerned, there was no doubt that I would come. This is a place where we have friends, where we have a common enemies, many of which we've heard today, and it's vital that we work together, particularly at times like these. In terms of the United Kingdom, we have a counter-terrorist structure that is experienced and capable of responding to threats from wherever they emerge. We've seen many successes, but we are not complacent. It's a rapidly changing international scenario where whole countries are being subsumed under the advance of the terrorist people, that many of whom we've described today. So we have to be nimble, we have to be as aware, and we have to be as ruthless as the people we face. And it's vital in doing that we work in international partnerships. But I will just finish where some of my talk has lingered. The founding father of Metropolitan Police was a man called Sir Robert Peel, and he said the police are the public and the public are the police. And my view is that certainly in the UK, if we continue to invest in community policing, we will deliver, first of all, a good relationship with all our communities, and secondly, the opportunity to collect evidence and intelligence, which later we can use in the criminal courts, which is where many of these people deserve to be. Thank you for listening.